A 13-year-old girl went door to door raising money for her school and then vanished just 2 houses away from a suspected killer's home. There was no scream, no chase, no obvious sign of struggle. Just a quiet May evening in Sunny Slope, a Phoenix neighborhood where the sound of summer cicadas drowned out any warning. Brandy Lynn Myers wasn't the kind of kid who wandered off. She had a mild brain injury from birth, wore pink glasses, and usually hid behind her little sister when meeting new people. But that night, she volunteered for a school fundraiser, carrying a printed form, walking house to house, asking for donations to the Read-a-Thon. She disappeared after just a few more steps, right near the home of a man later accused of murdering at least 2 other women. It took police 2 years to even suspect him. It took prosecutors 10 to decline filing charges. And Brandy's family? They lost everything. The question still haunts the block. How does a 13-year-old girl vanish in the middle of a neighborhood, and no one gets charged for 30 years? Brandy Lynn Myers was born and raised in Sunny Slope, a working-class neighborhood in Phoenix, where low-slung rooftops gathered desert dust and power lines tangled above like brittle spiderwebs. No one ever called it a nice area. But for Brandy, it was home. The sound of familiar barking dogs, the garbage truck always on time, and neighbors who sometimes brought over fresh bread. Brandy was the oldest child in the Myers family. Her mother, Christine, described her as a gentle soul. A little clumsy, a little absent-minded, but always trying her best. A high fever in early childhood had left Brandy with a mild brain injury, which made learning and reflexes slower than other kids her age. She wore pink glasses. Her light brown hair was usually tied up high. She loved comic books, and especially adored reading class, which is why she was so excited to join the school's Read-a-Thon fundraiser. She told me she wanted to help her class get new books, her mother recalled. She figured if she could walk a few blocks and collect even just coins, it was worth it. Brandy didn't like crowds, but she was always willing to give her time. She didn't have close friends, but she loved her little sister fiercely, the only person she always held hands with when crossing the street. On the morning of May 26, 1992, Brandy woke up earlier than usual. She picked out a denim skirt, a green t-shirt, and her favorite white and pink sneakers. She carefully folded the donation list from the day before and tucked it into her skirt pocket. "Mom, I'm going to keep collecting," she said as she headed out the door. The last person to see Brandy was her mother, standing in the doorway, waving. She walked off just like any other day. Nothing felt off. I didn't know it would be the last time. Around 6:30 p.m., Brandy met up with a friend near the school. The 2 girls went door to door, asking for donations as the Arizona sun began to fade. The heat still clung to the air. By 8 p.m., they decided to split up. Her friend needed to head home. Brandy said she'd hit just 2 more houses. One of those houses was just 2 doors down from the home of Brian Patrick Miller. No one knows which door she knocked on first. No one noticed which direction she walked. And no one, not even her friend, remembers what Brandy said the last time they saw her. But there's one thing even her mother didn't know at the time. Before she left the house that day, Brandy had written down a specific address on her fundraising sheet. That address was Brian Patrick Miller's. As the sun dipped behind the low rooftops of Sunny Slope, no one knew it would be the night everything shattered. Brandy Lynn Myers, the 13-year-old girl with pink sneakers and matching pink glasses, walked alone down Hatcher Street, not far from home. It was a street she'd walked many times before. She clutched her fundraising forms in both hands, a few signatures already scrawled across the page. At each stop, Brandy politely knocked and gave her rehearsed line. "I'm collecting for Sunny Slope's Read-a-Thon. Even $1 helps." Most adults would smile, compliment her manners, and gently close the door. But that evening, someone opened their door, and what happened next has never been fully known. Around 8:15 p.m., a neighbor recalled seeing a brown-haired girl walking past his front yard while he watered the lawn. He glanced once and assumed she was someone's daughter from across the street. That was it. Around the same time, Brandy's friend, the one who had been out with her earlier, made it home safely. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary. There were no screams, no strange sounds. A child walked past a few houses and vanished. By 8:45 p.m., Brandy's mother started to worry. Her daughter had promised to be home by 8:30. By 9:00, with the street now fully dark, she stepped outside and began calling Brandy's name. Neighbors joined in, at first checking backyards, side alleys, and nearby friends' houses. No one had seen her. No one had heard anything. By 10 p.m., Brandy's mother called the police. "My daughter's missing." The police response was ordinary. "She's probably wandering around. Maybe she stayed at a friend's place," they said. No alerts were issued. No roads blocked off. No Amber Alert. Because in 1992, the Amber Alert system didn't exist yet. An officer filed a basic report writing, "No signs of foul play. No signs of a crime. Just a girl who hadn't come home." By morning, Brandy's mother was printing flyers using her own money. She stood outside the school, handing them to students, teachers, and parents. "Did anyone see this girl last night?" she asked again and again. Only confused headshakes came in return. Brandy had vanished as if she'd never been there at all. No witnesses. No sounds. Not a single trace. But then, weeks later, a woman called the Phoenix Police Department. She said she believed her son might know what happened to Brandy. Roughly a week after Brandy disappeared, the phone rang at the police station, sparking either a new lead or a chill down the spine. The caller was the mother of Brian Patrick Miller, a young man who lived just 2 doors down from Brandy's house. She didn't say much, but what she said made the officer on the line stop writing. "My son has a history of violence toward women. I think he might know something about the missing girl." At the time, Miller was just in his early 20s. He kept to himself. Neighbors described him as like a ghost. You knew someone lived there, but you never saw him come out. He had once been arrested for stabbing a woman with scissors at a local market, but was released after a few years, citing mental health concerns. And the night Brandy disappeared, the lights inside Miller's house stayed on late. When police first approached Brian, they didn't search his home. They didn't collect DNA. They didn't record the interview. They simply asked a few questions and let him go. No one knew then that Brian Patrick Miller would later be convicted of murdering 2 other women, Melanie Bernos and Angela Brasso, in gruesome attacks. Both of those murders took place after Brandy's disappearance. Both victims were found near the same canal system that winds through Sunny Slope. But back in 1992, Brandy was just another missing girl. Police didn't classify the case as serious. They suggested Brandy may have run away. They said she was 13, not exactly a little kid. One investigator even told her mother, "Are you sure she didn't run off with a boy?" Those words cut deep. A cruel insult to Christine, the mother who clung to the phone for weeks, hoping it would ring with news of her daughter. But it never rang. Over the next 2 months, nothing changed. There were no large-scale searches, no surveillance footage, no final image of Brandy. And then, like scissors cutting through a fragile thread, hope began to fade. The case slipped into silence. Until years later, when Miller was arrested for murder, and police finally revisited the case they had overlooked for far too long. A passage from Miller's ex-wife's journal later revealed a haunting line. "He once told me there was a little girl who came into our house, but he never said what happened after that." As weeks turned into months with no answers, Brandy Lynn Myers' disappearance faded from the public's mind. But for Christine, her mother, time froze at exactly 8 p.m. that night. She started her own investigation, asking neighbors, re-examining every small detail. One woman, who lived just 3 doors down from Brian Miller, remembered hearing a door open and then slam shut on the night Brandy vanished. She wasn't sure which house the sound came from, but when asked back in 1992, police never recorded her statement in the official report. Another witness, a student at Brandy's school, recalled something unsettling. She had seen Brian Miller standing in his front yard days before, just staring, watching kids walk by. He never said anything, she told investigators, just stared for a long time without blinking. Police found no reason to follow up. Meanwhile, one detail haunted Christine, something she couldn't explain. Brandy's small backpack, the one she always carried, was never found. She had it with her that night, holding her donation sheets and the loose change she had collected. But no backpack, no paper, no items of hers were ever discovered within a 5-mile radius of home. Then, years later, a retired Phoenix officer was reviewing the case file. He noticed a strange line in the records. A paper resembling a donation form blown onto someone's porch. Source unknown. That note led nowhere. No follow-up, no evidence collection. Just another overlooked detail. Maybe it was a coincidence. Maybe not. But in a case with no physical evidence, even the smallest clue could be the victim's last voice. And then, a chilling coincidence. Just 3 months after Brandy disappeared, another girl, Shannon Amok, went missing. Same age, same area. A few weeks later, her body was discovered near a canal. Shannon had brown hair, a small frame. She looked strikingly similar to Brandy. In Shannon's case file, one name appeared on the list of persons of interest, Brian Patrick Miller. But that file, too, was left to collect dust. In the early 2000s, nearly a decade after Brandy disappeared, an unexpected voice brought the case back into focus. Brian Miller's ex-wife. Her name was Amy, and in an unofficial interview, she said something that made investigators fall silent. He once told me, "A little girl came into our house," but he never said what happened after that. Amy described how, in late May of 1992, Brian came home acting strange, withdrawn, silent, like he was hiding something. Not long after, he abruptly changed the locks on the back door. There hadn't been any break-ins. She asked why. "All for safety," he replied. Sometime later, while cleaning the storage room, Amy found a small gray backpack. Inside, a few coins and a crumpled piece of paper. She asked Brian about it. He snatched the bag out of her hands and threw it away. At the time, Amy knew nothing about Brandy's disappearance. But years later, when she saw old news reports and read Christine Myers' description of her daughter's belongings, she froze. The backpack, the coins, the paper. It was all too familiar. She actually went to police in 2006 to share what she knew, but her statement was never entered into the official record. Why? No one knows. Maybe because there was no physical evidence. Maybe because Brandy's case had already been labeled a non-criminal missing person. But one thing is certain, Amy's fear was ignored. And there was one more thing she remembered, something she could never shake. Brian had once repeated a strange phrase. "That little girl, no one cares about her. No one even remembers her name." At the time, it sounded like nonsense. But knowing what we know now, that Brandy was the forgotten victim, the phrase reads like a twisted confession. When investigators later tried to verify Amy's claims, they discovered Brian Patrick Miller had already been arrested for the murders of Melanie Burness and Angela Brasso. His DNA matched both crime scenes. The timeline. Those killings happened in 1992 and 1993, which meant if police had investigated Miller properly back then, Brandy might have been his first known victim. So what stopped them? What made them dismiss a child's disappearance when the signs were right there? Now, we revisit the night Brandy disappeared, but this time, not through the eyes of her mother, but through the neighbor who lived directly across from Brian Miller. Eileen Ramirez had lived on that street for over 40 years. Her small home sat directly across from the Miller house, just a patch of grass and a weather-worn wooden fence between them. In 1992, when Brandy Lynn Myers disappeared, Eileen was retired. Every evening, she'd sit in her wooden chair on the front porch and read the paper. That was my routine. Around 8 o'clock, I'd make tea, read the newspaper until it got dark, she recalled in an interview many years later. That night, she remembered seeing a girl walking by, wearing glasses, a green shirt, holding a piece of paper. She nodded politely when she passed. I thought that must have been the Myers girl. Then, Eileen heard a creaky gate swing open in the direction of the Miller house. A door slammed shut, and then silence. It all happened very fast, but what stuck with me was the lights inside Miller's house, turning on and off, over and over, like someone was moving from room to room. She heard what sounded like an argument, not loud, but enough to make her pause. And then, total quiet. Eileen assumed it was a domestic spat. Miller lived alone, but people came and went. Maybe a girlfriend, maybe gaming buddies. I didn't think much of it at the time. Who would have guessed? What made Eileen's account so critical was the timing, between 8:15 and 8:25 p.m., exactly when Brandy vanished. But tragically, police never spoke to Eileen in 1992. It wasn't until nearly 20 years later, when an investigative reporter reopened the case for a local paper, that she shared what she remembered. And the reporter asked a haunting question. If police had gone door to door back then, if they'd asked you, "Could you have helped find Brandy?" Eileen didn't answer right away. She looked down, eyes welling with tears. "Maybe, but at the time, I thought they knew what they were doing." That quiet sentence is the summary of an entire tragedy. A child disappears. A neighbor sees something, and a system assumes it already knows enough. But the real twist was still coming, because 23 years later, Brian Patrick Miller was finally arrested. and said something no one could believe. In 2015, Phoenix police made a stunning announcement. Brian Patrick Miller, the man once quietly suspected in Brandy Myers' case, had been arrested and charged with the murders of two women, Angela Brasso and Melanie Bernas. Both attacks had occurred just a year after Brandy vanished. Angela was found in a canal, brutally murdered while biking near her home. Melanie was killed in nearly the same manner, just miles away. These crimes shook Arizona. But for over 20 years, police were unable to name a suspect, until modern forensic technology revealed a match. Biological evidence at the scenes perfectly matched Miller's DNA. The news of Miller's arrest sent shockwaves through Brandy's family. Christine, Brandy's mother, spoke quietly at a small press conference. "I'm not surprised it was him. I'm just heartbroken that we've been saying this since 1992. As soon as Miller was taken into custody, investigators reopened Brandy's file. They revisited old statements, rechecked the leads that had once been ignored. One detail stood out. Back in 1992, Miller was asked if he knew Brandy. His answer? "I don't remember. Maybe I saw her in the neighborhood." But now, 23 years later, while being interrogated for the two murders, without any pressure, Miller said something else. "That little girl, I think she came to my house once. But I don't want to talk about that." It wasn't a formal confession. There was no body, no physical evidence. But what he refused to say was more chilling than what he admitted. Prosecutors ultimately declined to charge Miller in Brandy's case, citing a lack of definitive proof, even though he had said, with his own mouth, that Brandy had been inside his home. What does that mean? It means Brandy Lynn Myers vanished, just 2 doors from her likely killer. It means the police knew who to suspect and didn't act. It means, if Miller had been arrested in 1992, Angela and Melanie might still be alive. And now, another theory has begun to surface. A theory that shakes the very foundation of everything we've believed so far. For nearly 3 decades, Brandy's family and the entire Sunny Slope community believed one thing. Brian Patrick Miller was the killer. He lived nearby. He had a violent history. He made cryptic statements. And when he was arrested for 2 other murders, it all seemed confirmed. But when investigators took a serious second look at Brandy's case, they ran into a truth that forced everyone to slow down. There were no eyewitnesses, no surveillance footage, no DNA, no body. Not a single piece of physical evidence tied Miller to Brandy. Every detail was circumstantial. Every clue a maybe. Maybe she was seen near his house. Maybe there was an argument. Maybe the backpack was hers. But maybe isn't enough to convict. So what had once felt like a solid theory suddenly began to crack. And investigators had to ask, what if Miller didn't do it? This new theory started with a closer look at Miller's own behavior. Yes, he was violent. That much was clear. But his crimes against Angela and Melanie followed a pattern. They were impulsive, public, and sloppy. Sudden attacks, poorly concealed bodies, emotionally driven violence. But Brandy? She vanished without a sound. No body, no evidence. No one saw which way she went. Her disappearance was too clean, too quiet. A senior investigator finally asked in a closed-door meeting, if it was Miller, why would he suddenly change everything? From targeting adult women to abducting a 13-year-old girl and leave no trace. That single question cracked open a darker possibility. One clue, overlooked for 30 years. Another neighbor, living just 3 houses from Miller, had once been investigated for child enticement during the very time Brandy disappeared. This man lived alone. He had been arrested for luring children into his yard with candy. His case was sealed because the victims were too young to testify. No one connected him to Brandy because everyone's eyes were locked on Miller. So now the question becomes, if we were looking in the wrong direction from the very beginning, where is the truth? This theory, the one involving the second neighbor with a record for luring minors, tore apart the narrative everyone thought they knew. Maybe it was Miller. Maybe it wasn't. But if it wasn't Miller, and it wasn't the second neighbor, then who? The bitter truth is this: we may never know. In the fog of doubt and fading memories, a far more dangerous force has emerged. One more powerful than any suspect. Collective silence. A child disappeared in the middle of a neighborhood. Dozens of homes, hundreds of eyes, and no one saw anything. No one remembers. No one sounded the alarm. No one wanted to get involved. Maybe someone heard a scream. Maybe someone saw a backpack discarded. Maybe a child overheard a confession and was too afraid to speak. The truth didn't vanish because it was too complex. It vanished because too many people chose not to speak. And that silence is what made Brandy the perfect victim for a crime no one saw. Now, more than 30 years later, all that remains is an empty space. No body, no grave, no evidence, just a name, printed on an old, weathered poster, still hanging crooked on a faded utility pole. Brandy Lynn Myers, missing since May 26, 1992. Brandy's family never left Sunny Slope. Christine still lives there, just a few houses from where Miller once lived. Every time she steps outside, she looks into the shadows between homes and asks herself, is there someone still holding the secret? And when asked one last time what she hopes for, Brandy's mother said only this: I don't need to know who did it. I just need someone to have the courage to say it. Brandy Lynn Myers would have turned 46 this year. She might have become a reading teacher, just like she dreamed of as a little girl. She might have had children of her own, maybe even a daughter who wore pink glasses, just like her. But Brandy's time froze forever at age 13, on a May evening, in a neighborhood where everyone knew each other, surrounded by dozens of doors, quietly closing. Police are no longer pursuing the case. The district attorney once declined to charge Brian Miller due to lack of evidence. And the other neighbor, the one once accused of luring children, died back in 2009. No one has been convicted. No one has taken responsibility. No one has ever said, I know what happened. And that is what makes Brandy's disappearance different. Not the brutality, but the indifference. The silence around children who don't make headlines. The isolation of families who don't have a voice. In countless interviews over the years, Christine Myers has never shown anger, only sadness and exhaustion. I don't need a name, she once said. I just want to know. Was my daughter in pain? Was she scared? Did she know I was waiting for her? Her words weren't an accusation. They were the words of a mother, crushed by time, but still alive in memory. Christine still keeps a copy of Brandy's fundraising sheet, the last one printed at the school office. Scrawled names, a few coins listed in blue pen. It has no legal value, but it's the only piece left of a 13-year-old girl who truly believed that a few coins could make the world better. We may never know who took Brandy, or how long she lived after knocking on that final door. But what we do know is this: some crimes don't live in case files. They live in the silence of a community. And sometimes, the most terrifying part isn't who killed Brandy Lynn Myers. It's that no one ever spoke up.